Conservative MP who tweeted in response to what the US Vice President said about random countries that we discussed earlier on. Hello to you, Ben. You might have heard the denials from the Vice President saying he wasn't talking about Britain and France. What's your response to that?
Well, I think the comments from the Vice President were badly misjudged, and I think he's done an awful lot of damage there. It's difficult to see who he was talking about if he wasn't talking about Britain and France. We're the only two countries that have really talked about putting any significant troops on the ground in Ukraine as part of peacekeeping efforts following any conflict. So I appreciate his need now to backpedal on those comments and walk them back, but it's clear that there was some mischief being made there in terms of those comments being, I would say, quite clearly aimed at Britain and France, particularly following the successful talks at the weekend with President Zelensky.
Right, we've just shown the tweets again where he says, you know, people are being dishonest about what I meant. I didn't actually name Britain and France. But you said the disrespect shown by the new US Vice President to the sacrifices of our service personnel is unacceptable, and I'm sure you stand by that. What would you like to hear, perhaps from the Prime Minister or indeed Kemi Badenoch on this?
I don't really think it's for them to call out the Vice President any more than they potentially would do. I think he knows the damage that's been done, and it would be good for him to make good on that apology. We know that J.D. Vance is a former US Marine himself, so he knows well the sacrifices made by British and French forces, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, standing shoulder to shoulder alongside America, following the invocation of Article 5 in response to 9/11, and that's how we ended up in Afghanistan. That's how I ended up in Afghanistan. I served in Sangin, and that was an area where the US Marines took significant casualties, as did we. And so I think it's crucial that President Vance clarifies his comments. If he wasn't talking about Britain and France, he might have been talking about some of our other NATO partners, particularly Denmark or Estonia, both of whom took per capita the same type of casualties that the US took on those operations. So I think he needs to come out and clarify those comments and make clear to everybody exactly who he stands behind and the value that he places on his allies.
Does it undermine what the Prime Minister here is trying to do in terms of collaborating and trying to find some sort of peace deal or work between the US and Ukraine when J.D. Vance comes out and says things like this?
I think it makes his job very difficult, and I think it causes some confusion as to exactly which position he's trying to negotiate with. I think we're very clear on what the Prime Minister wants to do with regards to any post-conflict peacekeeping forces and his stance in support of Ukraine. I think we're less clear, much less clear, on exactly where the US stand on this, and particularly where the US stands in relation to Russia.
How much damage has been done? You say damage has been done. What exactly?
I think you can see from the responses from myself, from the Shadow Defence Secretary James Cartledge, there's been some real offence caused here, and I think it's something that will linger in the memory for a lot longer than the tweet.
Ben Obese-Jecty, thank you very much, joining us there from Central Lobby in the Houses of Parliament. Well,